it's Jazz Ford. Welcome back to another banging episode of Heavy on Kingdom. I always say that how excited I am to start off each new podcast episode, but today is truly a special one. I have my bestie podcast today, Paige. She is super duper special. She's passionate. She's a fireball. And she's a prayer warrior. Give it up, Paige. Woo, 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 woo. Hey, D. What's up?
Yes, how are you?
I'm so good. I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. We've been trying to get this together for a minute, but we finally got schedules together and just so glad to have you on.
I'm so excited to be here. I could barely sleep. I literally was like, oh, I get to do a podcast tomorrow with my best friend. Like, nothing could be more exciting to me. I was like, Jesus, I get to talk about you and be with my best friend. Like, my life is made.
Yeah, so I want to dive into the first 15. It's our first segment. But before we do that, I just want to give viewers a taste into like our friendship, how we start knowing each other. And I always tell my view, but it'll be cool to hear from your perspective, like
Oh my
your first
God.
impressions.
Yeah, no. Okay, so we were college roommates. That's how we met. So we were freshman year roommates too. So we initially weren't in the same room, but you had a roommate that left, and I never had a roommate that showed up. So we ended up consolidating, and we always saw each other in passing because we like shared that bathroom. And we're always like, she's so sweet. Like I remember meeting your grandma like when you moved in. I remember meeting your
Oh,
family when you
forgot
moved in.
about that.
Yeah, because like I was already in, but like I was like, oh, dude, like she got people. Because I was coming from California, so like you were still in Georgia, so I was like, I didn't even know that was like a thing to have like a tribe of people for real who was like, no, we gonna make sure she's straight, you know. So I love that. I love that, and I remember meeting. I was like, wow, she's just a light. Like she was just always a light, and it was like something that I appreciated. I knew you were always in your word, and your grandma had the full "I'm a praying grandma" like vibe. So I was like, yeah, we're gonna be good. And then once our roommates moved out, we ended up moving in together. It was like, oh my gosh, where has this person been my entire life? Like this is like
Inseparable.
could not tell me anything. You are like the pinnacle of a friend to me. So and
Aww.
like I know I saw something the other day. It was like comparing relationships, and it was like, does this person treat you like this? Like, if they don't treat you like this, then they aren't a friend. And that's very much what you are, what you've been. Like, we don't bother each other too much. Like, we can like not talk, but then we always know.
Always come back.
That
Yeah.
check in, you know that. Oh, you were on my spirit. Like, what's going on? Are you okay? I'm like, no.
Right. Bestie check in. No,
Like,
this is
that's
what's going on.
right. And I never feel like I'm a burden, and I never feel like I literally come to you with the most crazy like this is what Jesus said, and I will just feel so comfortable saying like and we'll break it down, and I send you so many paragraphs.
The paragraphs and the laughs. If you look through our threads, it's nothing but emojis. Like laughing emojis. Oh my gosh. Memes,
Yes.
TikToks, and
I'm still in the 20th. I'm not even in the like 21st. I'm like way behind on social media, but you actually are doing better than me now. You're like doing podcasts, like
for
platforms.
those out there listening, like D used to fill me in on everything that was going on because I'm not heavy on social media like that until this podcast where I had to get out there and actually like put it out there. But she would send me stuff and she'd be like, I already saw that. If I send it to her, she would like, you know that meme that says, well, watch it again, watch it again. Like that would definitely be me. But I so forgot about that. Like with my grandma and everybody being there. I think we were just praying to like, over the
Yeah,
room and
we
everything.
were.
That's when I first met you. That was like very first impression. And like
Yeah.
you said, like, oh my gosh, you would just I remember you just been so energetic and just such a fireball and just so happy in your face, like, hey, I'm Dara. Nice to meet you. And I'm like, hey. Like,
Right. Yeah, no. You were one of the two of us. You were
and,
definitely like calm down, D. Because I would get hyped about stuff too. I remember I would get hyped about stuff, and you'd be like, D, like, just pray about it. Like, I think you need to, like, you need to woosah, you need to breathe, And I'll be like, nah. So, yeah,
Yeah,
very
and it's
much.
so
I
funny to see like how our friendship has like evolved over the years because the foundation really is Jesus and laughter, you know? Jesus
100%.
and laughter. So, just given that little backdrop, let's go right into the first 15. First 15 is the first segment, and it's basically giving homage to the older church. So, on this podcast, I want to rewrite the narrative of, all the things that the church got wrong and tell the things that the church got right. And some of the things that I feel like they did was praise and worship, was testimony service. So give us a look into your testimony because there's a great scripture that says we overcome in Revelation by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Give us a look into your testimony of how you came to Christ.
Yes, well, because again, I grew up in church, so giving honor to God, who's the head of my life, because that's how they used to start it. You gotta give honor to
Right.
God, who's the head of your life. I want to give honor to the man or woman of the house, but Minister Jazz, I want to give honor to you, for this
Stop.
platform. You know, but yeah, no. I grew up in church. I am like fourth generation apostolic is what I grew up under. Which honestly, like looking back now it isn't really. It's more like a title. Because I'm non-denominational. My parents are non-denominational. My parents are pastors. Godparents pastors. My grandfather was bishop. So yeah, lots of my grandma was first Sunday row, like motherboard. So I very much grew up in the church. And honestly, it was one of those things where I say it doesn't like quote unquote matter, but it matters is because my first encounters with Christ, like first, it was me and my little sister. I was like 4. And we were watching Azusa 93 on VHS, and my sister loved being preacher. Like that was her dream, was to like be preacher, not people to slay people out in the spirit. So I was the only person she could slay out in the spirit. So, and then we had like our teddy bears lined up, and she was like laying them out, and I was throwing the towel over them. So like this was very much my childhood. This is very much how I grew up, with the word and with like music and the gospel music just being played in the house. So, but when she had slayed me out this particular day, this is like my last day playing church because I literally she like slayed me out because we spoke in tongues when we was here.
I cannot.
I was laid, man. When I tell you, like the power of God sat on me, like in that moment at 4 years old. I'm not joking. I like tried to move. I was like, oh my God, what is happening to me? I couldn't move. I literally like my eyes. I remember my eyes being open, but like I couldn't see my house anymore. Like everything went into this light.
Mm.
And I remember being in like this garden, and I can feel like a smile around me. It makes me cry. Even I was thinking about my testimony last night. The peace that even when I go back to my very, very first encounter, it still brings me the same peace. I remember this smile just like welcome me. It was like, welcome. This is God. Like, hi, how are you? And I just remember being like, oh my God, like my flesh, like my physical body was like terrified because I'm like, I can't move. I can't wiggle my fingers. I can't pick my leg up. Like there is literally a presence on me right now. Like my mama, what's my mama going to think? Like this is my natural mind, but like I could feel my spirit and my soul being like at peace. Like everything I felt warmed. I felt welcomed. I felt like there was so much that I was given in that moment. And like, it felt like it was like an hour. Like, I felt like I was down there for a minute. I was like, ain't nobody checking on me. Like, I'm in the middle of the floor, literally in the living room. And our house is not that big. Ain't nobody gonna check on me. My sister clearly is gone because what is happening, right? And there was just so much that was given to me in that moment. And then like I finally felt like, okay, I could start wiggling. I remember my first feeling was like wiggling my fingers again and being like, okay, I'm coming out of it. Okay. So like I'm not, and I remember being able to look at the ceiling, and I sat up, and there wasn't nobody around me. And I was like, y'all just really left me. I was like, wow, that was really, I was like, I'm never playing church again. Like that was, but that was like, you do not play with God. Okay. He's not your playmate when it comes down to these type of things. Know what you're doing. But that was very much when, one of the things that I took away from that moment was possession, was having like, you either yield to something that's of God or you're yielding to something that's not. And it takes your physical manifestation to do it. You know what I mean? Like I was playing church, but I also had a long between the years of 4 and 12, there was a lot of spiritual things that occurred, and a lot of like demonic activity, a lot of godly activity, and things that just were manifesting that really solidified like, one, I know who God is for myself. Y'all can say what you want to. I know what I experienced. I was 4. You can't change this for me. And two, that I have to know Him for myself, because my mom, my dad, they can't. They have their lives. They have their relationship with Christ. I have to have one for myself, and that was very much something that my mom even taught us growing up. She's like, you can't go to heaven on my coattail. Like you gotta, you better call on Jesus for yourself. Okay. I've known is that I gotta call on Jesus for me. Like that nightlight can't help me. That, you know what I mean? That
Not the
like those
nightlight.
the nightlight, them teddy bears that you think that are like you sleeping with to keep you safe, they cannot help you when you are like in the
That's
middle of
deep.
a battle.
Those early encounters that you said that you had, it was like a trickling effect and also a learning process, a learning curve of like, oh, okay, that wasn't God. This was God. That wasn't God. This was God. And I could attest to that too. I remember growing up having spiritual attacks, but didn't really have voice for them. I didn't know that that's what was going on.
Right.
I was dreaming even when I was young, but I would have like nightmares, like horrible nightmares. I'm talking about like every time I would go to sleep, I would have such horrible nightmares or like spiritual attacks where just spirits just coming like,
Yeah.
just attacking me in my sleep
Dying.
and I didn't
Yeah.
yeah, and
Dying.
I didn't know that what that was until I got older. And because I was it's even if I would ask my grandma back then, she probably would have told me, and she did tell me later on, but I would keep it to myself because the nightmares were so bad that I
Yeah.
didn't want to like express it, or I thought it was just a thing that I was going through, like I didn't want to express it, and
Isolation.
that's
Yeah.
attack in itself. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's what I was just saying. With that, like I knew that the spiritual world was real. Like, I knew that the spiritual world was real because I was going through things like that. But then when God started talking to me on the other hand, I saw how different it was.
Absolutely. Very much learned at an early age that you have to know God for yourself, and I found comfort in knowing like I know God has chosen me. If He chose me at 4, He'll choose me at 34. He'll choose me at 44. He'll choose me at 14. He'll choose me at any age. So, I got saved though officially at 12, which was the craziest.
Dive into that.
So I was 11, excuse me. I was 11 years old. But like that transitional, it went from 11, 12 because I was in the 7th grade. And I've always been like this, a sunshiny person. I like to bring people joy. I like to have like a good atmosphere. And at that age, I really didn't have people who were happy around me. A lot of them were self mutilators. A lot of them were cutters and had like depressive thoughts and suicidal ideations. And, I just didn't want to see anybody sad. But being that I was putting myself in that situation, I was leaving myself vulnerable to those same thoughts.
Mm.
And those same type of spiritual attacks. And even though I consciously knew, okay, God exists, I knew also that I had not accepted Him and I made the trip down the altar. You know what I mean? Like I haven't been baptized officially. I was dedicated as a baby, but my mom was very much, my father were both like, you need to accept, like when you're ready to be baptized, when you're ready to accept Jesus Christ, when you're ready to have the Holy Spirit into your life, you'll know and you'll make that decision for yourself. So I was 12. All of these different things were happening, and I was just surrounded by so much negativity. And I remembered I got my first D. I say first because there were others. I got my first D on a report card. I was in geometry, and then I was like taking a bath. I was just like so sad about bringing home this report card. And like I remember hearing my sisters outside the bathroom like blaming me for something, and they're like, "Dad did it," and I was like, in my logical mind, I was saying, well, I'm the root of all of these problems that I have. Granted, again, seventh grade problems, child's play, right? Compared to life now that we think about it. But when you're spiritual texts don't care. They will use whatever you feel to amplify and to destroy you. And I very much was like, I'm the sole purpose, or I'm the sole cause of all of these problems. If I wasn't here, then I wouldn't be, then nobody would have these problems anymore. They wouldn't have to worry about me, you know? So I was like, okay. So I decided I was going to, I'm laughing, it's not funny, but I decided I was going to drown myself, right? Like in the tub, like, and in that moment, like I was committed to it. So like, when I was under the water, I was like, I'm going to do this. And I felt the spirit of God. He like sat, so I had like my tub, and then we had like a counter that was like right next to it. And I felt like Jesus literally sat on the counter next to me. And like, as I'm about to take this huge gulp of water, and he's like, you're going to drown yourself, but you don't want to get your hair wet. And I was like, what? And like that one moment of hearing, you don't want to get your hair wet, like it snapped me back. And so I like came back up and was like, wait, what am I doing? And like I remember as I'm coming up, like I remember seeing this huge auditorium, like these people. I was like out of my body, and I was just seeing a whole bunch of different people. And I remember God explicitly saying, he's like, you can't see these faces, but these were the people who would not know your influence, and who would not know your spirit, and who would not be would not know my love, because you did this now. And I was like, okay, like, all right, well, I don't want this life. I don't want it. I don't value what the gift of life, is so called, that you've given me. So here, you take my life. I don't want it anymore. Then, so I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to give my life to Christ, because I clearly don't know what I'm doing with it. I clearly don't value what you've given me. I don't even know, you know what I mean? And for them, I knew that you were real, but for him to say, like, these are the people that you would never know, because you made this decision, because you decided that you, like, a D was worth taking your life, like, no. So that was really 11, 12. And then explicit, that was like the first time I actually audibly heard God's voice. And then the second time was after I gave my life. I gave my life that Sunday. I got baptized, I think the Sunday or two afterwards.
And this was 12.
This was, 11, 12. So it was like December-ish, I want to say. No, I got baptized in July. So I was still 11. But by 12 was the following year. So I went on like a year like fasting and just being in the Word. And I got a bike. I got a bike for Christmas. And I've never ridden a bike. So I was riding my bike, and I'm like, yeah, I'm being cute in the street, running up and down the street.
She was in the streets.
You know, that's the closest I ever got to being in the streets. So yeah, you know, without a helmet too, I knew I was fly. And so I'm just riding down the street, and I remember hearing, as clear as we are talking right now, it's like when you hear the sound of the motorcycle, get out of the street. And so I'm thinking like, okay. Almost immediately after hearing that voice, like I heard the motorcycle, and I was like, that was immediate. Like I was like, okay, well, I guess I gotta get out. As soon as my back tire hit the hit the sidewalk, there were two cars that came racing up our streets. They were racing each other. One was like, both were white. One was like a white SUV, and one was like a Mustang. And I remember them literally racing each other coming up the street. And I was like, oh my God, I heard the voice of God. It wasn't, oh my God, I almost died. It was, oh my God, that was God. Because it was nothing that like could have prepared me for those two cars coming up the street, and I was in the middle of the street, and it was not, you know, there was one way to go up for people and there was one way for people to go opposite traffic. So there was no way that I would have survived them, and they were coming at a such a significant speed. Like I'd have been gone for real. So I was
Saved your life. Yeah.
literally. So I was like, I remember running in the house and be like, "Mommy, mommy, Jesus, talk to me." She was like, "What'd he say?" She said, he told me to get out the street. That's not important. Like he talked to me." So it was so, I just remember feeling like, okay, like I know God's real and I know that he's talking to me, and I know that from this point on, like I know he wants me to live. I know he wants me to do something. Like let's do it. Let's see what
Hmm.
we're on this journey for. And I
So
know
good.
there was so many different things that like just I began fasting a lot more, and not even like traditional fasting. Like I would not talk, because one of the things that I really was, especially younger, being that I had suicidal ideations, self-talk was something, and just your vision, not seeing yourself as Christ sees you, was something that I really needed to work on. And just being negative and just like mindless mindless talk, you know, mindlessly saying things that didn't agree with the word and didn't line up with the word. So I would have like fasts where I didn't talk for a day or two and just like was in my word during lunchtime. And just having, I mean, obviously it was a long process because I'm 33 now, but just to like have those index cards with scriptures on them. And I know you remember, like we would do that in college. We would have our index cards with like our scriptures on them, and we would have
Yeah.
our words like taped up on our taped up on our
No,
wall.
you're really big on that. I remember being in college and like when we first moved in together, how you would have prayer music or worship music playing at night. And that was new to me,
Yeah,
even though I had, been around that in the atmosphere of that, but like I've never seen someone as young as me, do that, do
right,
those things. And
right.
like, yeah, so I was just like, oh, okay, guy, I see what you're doing here. Like, like I
Yeah,
see.
like he would give me instructions like when I was 13. Um, so he told me, like, he just told me to read James. And I was like, okay. So every night before bed and every morning when I wake up, I would read the book of James in its entirety. And I was like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be getting out of this. Like, what am I supposed to be getting? And then it was one night that was just unprovoked. And I heard him say, you have to forgive him. And I was like, I have to forget what? And he brought back to my mind that I had been molested as a child. I was like 3 years old, and it was another kid, and like me and him were working through it. When I tell you, I was crying. Like, mind you, I shared a room with my sister at 13, so it wasn't. But she was a hard sleeper, so it was just me and God, and I'm sitting there like, what is this? Like, why are you bringing this? Why are you bringing this up? Like, I was doing just fine. He was like, no, you need to work through this. And I was just remember being like, dang, wow, I didn't even realize that something like that far back and that repressed even like was affecting me. You know, it wasn't something that I was thinking about. So why is it something I need to heal from? Mm.
Mhm.
But, even like things like that. But honestly, I felt so much lighter, and I felt like I was able to speak to people who have things that they don't even remember, encounters that hurts that they've suffered, and like people doing them, encounters that they don't associate with future behaviors, that they don't associate with, their character, because they've put it away. And so for me, I was like, okay, well, what does forgiveness look like? And it was my first real like process of walking through like this explicit event happened to me. I felt like this from this point on. And even like me being 3, like, or I didn't have that like that cognitive thought of, this is abnormal, this isn't something that's supposed to happen to me. Did I
Mhm.
tell did I didn't even remember that I was the one who told my mom that it happened. I thought my sister did, because I just felt so, I was still very much a victim in my heart. Like, I thought I was a victim, even though I had moved on. I had was like, I'm over it. I'm over it, you know, but it was still inside me. And so, like, to have this conversation with God about this event, I was like, well, I hope I'm gonna be honest, I was like, I know he's in jail. Like, in my mind, I was like, I know he's in jail. I know he's probably like doing a life of crime. And God was like, and is that what you want for this person? And I was like, ooh, I had to sit and think about this. Like, is this, that's not aligning with Christ. That's not aligning with, even though what was done to me hurt, even though what was done to me isn't fair, it wasn't fair to me. Um, I still have to find within my space, within my heart, the like space to forgive this person. And I remembered him being a lot bigger than what he was. I remember him being, I thought he was older. I thought he was 13. The kid was actually like 7. I was 3. Like, he
Mhm.
didn't know any better, because he was a foster kid. And he was somebody who had been past his name at the time wasn't even the name he was born with, or the name he was given after they gave him, because they gave him back to the foster system because of what happened to me. And like, that was ultimately what happened. And I was actually the one who told. um and it wasn't even my sister, it was me. So I was like, wow, I didn't even recall this scenario the way that, like, it actually happened, because of my trauma, because of, what I thought or what I was thinking was happening. And so it took God being like, you need to get through this, you need to get over this, you need to heal, for me to be like, wow, okay, this is what this is the necessary steps that I have to take. So, not just for this situation, but for future situations. It very much is the foundation for me to take steps when people do me wrong, or when something doesn't go my
Mhm.
way. Then it's like, how do I navigate forgiveness then? Do I just tuck it away? No, I process it. I sit on it. I let the word talk to me. I go to my scriptures and be like, okay, well, if Christ can go through these things, if all the disciples can go through these things, if my parents, who everyone's had some type of environment where everyone's been hurt, everyone has had a suffering moment, and if they can go through these situations and still find Christ in them, and still find that there's a way out, and still find like that healing in that moment of, this isn't worth my stress, this isn't worth my health, this isn't worth my relationship with Christ. So
Yeah.
that was something that was really the foundational catalyst for me to like look at what healing looks like, and what like
Mhm.
working through healing through Christ look like. Um, and so I feel like I walk in more of a spiritual logic. And logically speaking, from a spiritual perspective, um, there was just no way that I could have healed from something that young, that traumatic, and like carry other things in the future. Like,
Mhm.
that just
Yeah.
was like,
I
why
totally
would
agree with
I,
that.
like, right? Because why would you do that? Like,
It's way
especially
too
like,
heavy to be carrying around like all of, so much after that, and you still got so much more to live.
exactly. And I have more egregious things that'll probably happen. You know what I mean? Like, because as you get older, life begins to life. And I just think it's so hilarious that the devil tries to like bring us down. And the word says,
At
the
such
joy
a
of the
young
Lord,
age too.
like, because if he couldn't get me then, he's definitely not getting me now.
To me, I think from your stories hearing is that God had already put that foundation in you so that you would know how his voice sounded. You'll know the redirection when it was time to be redirected. He showed you in different ways too. It all wasn't the same way, you know. He
Yes.
came to you audibly. He came to you by just laying his spirit on you, you know. He came to you. He speaks to you in dreams. You didn't mention that, but I know that
Yeah.
firsthand from being like your bestie. But he speaks to you in dreams. He speaks to you in so many ways. That seed of that foundation that has later like trickled down into all those areas. The devil tried it, but
Tried
it
me.
didn't work.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, you are absolutely true. And that's one of the things that I feel like I try to articulate to people when they're like, what does God's voice sound like? So God's voice sounds like you, but smarter. Like, I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how, like, I've had some good ideas and I'm like, that's a good idea. And then I pray about it and God will give me the God idea. And he'll give me the plan and the plan. He'll be like, yeah, that was nice, but this. And I'm like, because I didn't think about da, 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 da. And so his voice is always like the voice that's just us but smarter. And I use example. I think that when people say like, oh, God spoke to me, it gets really testy because sometimes you're like, wait, but was that God? How do you know that it's God though? You know, and honestly, it's a trial and error.
Been wrong and thought that it was God that led you that led you to do something. Like how
Remember,
many times? How many
there's
times, bro?
countless, and so notably,
Me
I know you
too.
know.
Like, people that I thought that, you know, that was supposed to be in my life forever. And I'm thinking like, yo, God told me this. But the thing that I like is that he never stops teaching us. And it's
Yeah,
different ways that, you know, like I said, like, well, even like you said, he's taught to you in different ways just for you to hear his voice and know his voice. But what I'm going through now is that I'm a dreamer. I feel like that's my thing. That's me and God thing. So when I don't have dreams, I feel some type of way. But he's getting to me now where like that's not the only way I could talk to you. You know?
correct.
That's not
Yes,
the only way that like I can impart my spirit. Like I'm so infinite. Like I could talk to you in so many ways through song, through just impressions in my spirit, through reading the
yes,
word, through
yes.
movies and TV shows. You know, I'll tell you in a minute, yo, I just saw this show. Da, 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 da. So it's just different ways. But I want to ask you with that, what is like a way that you know for sure that God talks to you now? Because I know that it, like me, it's changed. Like as we grow in God, like the way He speaks to us changes. What ways do you mostly know that you're hearing from God?
For me, it always is centered in the peace that I get. Like, granted, his voice, yes, his voice comes in, yes, my dreams. Yes, it comes to me audibly. Yes, it comes through, even through you. Like, God has used you to speak to me on things that I was like, okay. All right. But, you know, it's always like, goes back to the peace that I get when I'm like, this answer is beyond my selfish wishes. This has a bigger purpose. Like, this answer is something that is not doesn't take me into consideration. It doesn't take my folk into consideration. It takes the greater good into consideration. And that's when I feel like I know, like, this is when am settled in it. And I think that that was one of the things that it's one of those things. Yeah, it's trial and error, but like the more you acknowledge this is the voice of God, this isn't me, and the more
Mm,
that you pursue it and pursue that
seek it.
instruction, yeah, it manifests itself at right before your eyes. Like, you will see, like, he said to do this because this provision will be made as you're taking the step. This provision will be made as you're taking the step. I remember God told me to get a car, and I was like, I don't want to get a car. I was doing a part-time job, a sample lady. I was making, like, my checks were like $175. Like, it was not buy a car. I was not making buy a car money, right? So I was like, parents van, like, no. And I was spending a lot of money on gas for the van. So I was like, this isn't this. I was like, nah, God's telling me this, but okay, okay, God, sure. I ended up getting in a car accident in my parents' van, and I was like, oh, oh, my whole world is falling apart because what am I gonna do?
Mama
And I
killed it.
remember, no, right? She was like, my van, but but she said, hey, but she said, hey, she's gonna be watching. So, but I remember being him just being like, I told you to get a car, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I was praying about when I was supposed to. I had to go get a car. Like literally, it was a Thursday that I got in the car accident. I had to get a car that Saturday because I was in the middle of working. I was in the middle of doing a program, like a culinary program, which was all the way in Venice. I live in Southern California. So people who don't know, that's like 3,000 miles away. I was like, I need to do this. And so I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, I asked Mama Q, I was like, Mom, can you come with me? She was like, no, ask your dad. I was like, Jesus told me to take you. Jesus told me three things specifically. He said, he has the car prepared for me. He said to ask for Walter when I got there. And he told me to take my mom. And my mom was like, well, I don't want to go. To ask your dad. And I was like, Mom, Jesus told me, Jesus told me you have to go with me. And so then my dad was actually like out doing something about the house. So she's like, oh, fine. Like, so I was like, yay. First box checked. Okay, I'm walking this thing out, right? So then he told me where to go. And I went to, it was a Honda dealership. And he told me who to ask for. And so the guy approached us. His name was Eduardo. It was not even Walter. I was like, he's like, hi, can I help you? I was like, I'm looking. You guys have anybody named Walter here? Like, I was like, I don't want to talk to you. I got to talk to Walter because God told me Walter. He was like, there's no one named Walter here. I was like,
Oh
he's
my
like,
god.
and then he's like, I was like, well, God told me to ask for Walter. He's like, you know what? If God told you, I could be Walter today. And we got there and we pulled up and it was my baby, my white Corolla. And I was like, dang, I did not want this white car. But that car was such a blessing when I tell you. Yes. But it was literally like such a blessing. I signed without putting any money down. So that was like the first blessing. I got the car at immediately was able to like refinance it and was able to reduce my payments down. I ended up paying the car off, literally pay for my car to make my payments. I always had gas money. I always had maintenance money. Even when I didn't know or didn't think, there were a couple times I broke down because I got another job and was driving even further away, breaking down out there. Like God still had like he had that car covered. I never got in a car accident
Provision.
again. Like, so when God tells you to do something and when you are convinced and you accept, like, this is the assignment God has given me, this is what he's told me to do, as you are moving, as you are stepping, as you are going, everything works itself out. And so that's one of the things that, like, I was meditating on Exodus and like the children of Israel leaving Egypt. And it wasn't until they were at the base of the Red Sea that the sea parted. Like they didn't walk up and the sea was already parted for them. You know what I mean? Like it would have
Yeah.
been like, oh, that bridge has been there. You know what I mean? Like that's the sea's been like that. But as they were going, as they had to see the fear, and I feel like that's one of the things we don't look at. We look at the Bible as stories instead of really putting ourselves in the situations of the
In those
people of the
situations,
testimony.
yeah.
Like they went to that Red Sea. They left knowing Pharaoh is on the tracks. Like Pharaoh is not even on horses. Like we are walking and we have all of our stuff. We have all of our belongings. And you mean to tell me like I gotta book it? You know what I mean? Like he is on me. He is not trying to like let me go. And they're definitely gonna kill us. Like these are the thoughts that I know they were thinking. And but at that moment, at that point of them reaching the Red Sea, the miracle happens. And that's where the provision came. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where like the confirmation of this is God versus this is you. And a lot of times we don't want to take the risk of saying, oop, that was me. Or we'll take the risk of saying, oop, maybe God won't do it this time, you know. And that's not for us as his servants and as his people to make that decision. We're supposed to walk it out regardless. And like that's one of the things that I carry when I'm going through anything now. It's like, no, like if this is, I know what the word says. I know what God says about me. I know his voice. If he says I need to go apologize to this person, if he says I need to say this to this person, then I need to do it because I don't know what, not just beyond me, but what in the atmosphere. And I say apologize to this person because one of my encounters in high school, I didn't get along with this guy. He didn't like me. I didn't like him. Feeling was mutual. We were not buddies. And I remember explicitly him telling me one day, he's like, go apologize to him. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't make out what you were, what you said, because I think you told me to apologize to him, and for what? For why?
Who, me?
Who, me? Nah, them. That message was for them, you know. But he told me to apologize to him, and I was like, ooh, and I sat on it, and I like, that's when you were young, and I was like, let me fast. Let me let me pray on this. I'm trying, I'm not trying to be an overzealous Christian. I just want to.
And that's another thing too. Like you made a point in there earlier. Usually, if it's something that you don't want to do, it really is God. If it's something good and it's something that you don't want to do, that's God. Like he's telling you, go forgive that person. Go tell that person I'm sorry.
Right.
Like
please do
be nice to that person anyway. That scripture in John that says like my sheep know my voice.
Yes.
Like my sheep know my voice, and my father know me, and I know the Father. So my sheep know my voice.
Yeah, because you're right. And I knew what he was saying to me, and I was like, let me just pray about it a little more, And he was like, so basically, because at some point when you do talk to God a lot, like he'll tell you, like, stop playing, like quit playing, like do what I asked. And so I was like, all right. So I remember it being after school, and it was so abnormal because the guy was like, normally I never see him after school, and God told me to do it this day. And I went the whole day, did not say jack to this boy, did not say anything. I was like, oh well. So he was standing right there outside in the back, like right where as I leave me and my sister, and I was like, dang. I just remember looking up being like, really? Like, really? So I was like, all right, okay. So I talked to him, and I talked to him, and I was like, hey, I just want to apologize. God's leading me is guiding me through some things, and I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but he's really put it on my heart to apologize to you. And I remember him just staring at me and looking at me being like, okay, like, all right. And I was like, well, my mom is here, so bye. And I remember just being like, God, that was such a waste of time. Like, he didn't even say he apologized back. He didn't he didn't bawl into tears.
We always think that like it like hearing from God and knowing God's voice too, it requires obedience. It requires like surrender. And it might not always look how we think it's gonna look,
Correct.
Like how you apologize to the guy, you expected him to be like, "Oh, I forgive you," like But no, it wasn't that way. Like God tell you to give to a person, and then you think they're gonna be so grateful and have so much gratitude and do this, and it's just the opposite. But it's you like knowing that God said it. That's what you have to cling on to. That God told you to do it. So you're right with God, not with that person, but you're right with God because God told you to do it.
A year or two later, someone was talking about him in a random setting, and they were like, yeah, he's a youth pastor now. And then he came up and they're like, he's a youth pastor now. They were like, somebody, I guess, apologized to him and said God did it. And I was like, oh, he gave his life. He's a youth pastor? Like, I would have never thought. You never know when the seed is sown. You don't get to determine that. Like, you don't get you do in a sense, because you're responsible for what you say and for when you say it, and how, like, being yielding to the spirit. But if if you yield to the spirit, you don't get to say how fruitful that seed is going to be. Like, you don't get to
Right.
determine.
How soon it sprouts or anything like that. It requires like spending time with God, spending time in the word,
100%.
and spending time just getting to know him, seeking his face,
Right.
praying, reading as much as we can, just like how we would do in relationships, how we would
Yeah.
do in like friendships. Like if somebody asks me about the Paige, I know that she's gonna look at Living Single reruns. I know you're gonna rock your pearls. I know you're gonna have like
I
your
know.
Vans. So if somebody telling me that you out rocking something that you wouldn't normally wear, I'm like, dang, that don't sound like D. And it's the
Right.
same with God, because the more you spend time in his word, the more you hear, his word, and spend time just seeking him, the more you know him and you know his voice and you're able to recognize it. So like over time, I'm like, oh, that don't sound like God. That doesn't sound like something God would say. That doesn't line up with the word. That doesn't line up with this or that or what God has done for me before.
That so for me, like, one of the things when it comes down to knowing God's voice, and you said, like, it's just about getting to know relationships. One of the things that I feel like I first read when it was in Genesis that stuck out to me was when God said, let's create man in our image. And so, like, being created in someone's image, like, you have their mannerisms, you have their mentality, you have their needs are your needs, like their wants are your wants, because that's what you've what's made you. You know what I mean? Like, that's what shaped you. And so when I thought about that, I was like, so like, again, that spiritual logic that I was talking about, like, logically speaking, if I want relationship, like, if I want to build a relationship, if I want to build trust, if I want to build, have, if I choose, you're my best friend. Why? Because, like, we have had these conversations. We've been deep with each other. We've cried together. We've gone through things where, like that weren't fair. We've gone through ups. We've gone through downs. You know what I mean? Like, we've
Mm-hmm.
gotten to know each other. If that is like how we build natural relationships, how we then naturally, like, how we build relationships with God is through the same way, reading the word, pouring ourselves into, like, being able to cry over the word and being able to be like, God, this sucks. Like, this situation that I'm in right now is not this is not it. Like, and just knowing that even in our lowest moments, he's with us. And that's one of the things that, like, people just think that
Mm-hmm.
listening to God and just good things are just always, like, being a Christian is always supposed to mean good things. And it's like, no, because it's a real relationship. And in real
It
relationships,
is
you're gonna be mad at God sometimes because you think that you
frustrated
thought that was,
sometimes.
yeah, you thought that was the answer. Like, you told me that was it. Like, what's up?
Mm-hmm.
And just to be able to be that, I've been mad at God and told him I was mad, and he just be laughing at me, and I know he does. But even in me being mad, he doesn't stop talking to me. You know what I mean? He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. He says he'll show me a scripture, and I'll be like, "Oh, okay." Like, I see
That
what you're saying.
understanding. Oh my gosh.
It comes out of, it comes from just get that spending that time in that word. I remember, like, opening the Bible, and immediately it took me to a scripture that was like, it was my sheep know my voice. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like, and I remember God asked me, like, do you know my voice? And I was like, duh. Like, of course I know your voice.
Not
Like, what do
duh.
you mean? Yeah, I did. I was
You
like,
sound like,
duh.
look, you sound like Peter. What do you what advice would you give to someone who's out there struggling to hear God's voice and they're going through that frustration season of feeling like God is not near?
Honestly, just keep going. It's one of those things where you wouldn't quit on a relationship when things got hard, especially if you
That's
want that
good.
relationship, and if you want to know this person, and you want to be around them, then there's going to be those times where you're like, you're not seeing eye to eye. You're not doing, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean, what you need to do, as far as you're on your end, like, you're not doing what you need to do. And, like, a lot of times for me, that was the part that was frustrating, was that, like, I knew God's perfect. so so who's really the problem here, right?
Right. Am I the problem?
Like,
Yeah,
I'm the
exactly.
problem. So like to know that I'm the culprit, you know what I mean? It's like, dang, like I thought I got it right. I thought this was what I was supposed to do. I thought this was the answer. I thought this was what I needed to do to make this happen and to have this dream fulfilled and to have, having like your plans determined. Like you have to have your plan so that God can exceed them, and it's a lot of times we get so stuck in our thoughts, and that's why it's like, was that you, me, or is that God? Is it me, or is it the devil? You know what I mean? Like we have like this notion of like these three separate voices, but the more that we pursue the word, the more that we're in the word, is the more that us start sounding more like him. We start sounding more like
That's
Jesus.
good.
And like, are we gonna always sound like Jesus? Of course not, because we're human. We gotta keep growing. We gotta keep evolving. But to not let those moments stop us, and to not let those frustrations of being like, because a lot of times, especially when you really like you get it right one time, you're like, "Hey, I'm good now." Like,
Yeah, I'm close to God. Like I hear him.
you
And then
see,
something
like,
happen, and you be like, "Dang, did
right.
God say that?" Like,
Yeah, and it's like
yeah,
it humbles you a little bit because you're like, okay, well,
exactly.
maybe not, So, but and depending on how like quick you're able to bounce back from that, like you should never. I think that's for me is the foundation of Christianity too. Is just that resilience of not getting stuck in. Dang, I missed it. Like, okay, you missed it, but guess what? You keep going, you'll get it again. You know what I mean? You'll have those
Yeah.
confirmations come again. God's not gonna love you any less because it takes you that time. He saw the beginning from the end. So he's already calculated all the times that we're gonna miss it. He's already calculated all the times that
Yes.
calculated me being like, I'm gonna wait.
You before you entered into your mother's womb. There is something like that is so great that Denzel said at a graduation one time that is like a motivational speech that's out there that just goes around. And he was just saying basically if you stay in the barbershop long enough, you're gonna get a cut. Like you keep trying to hear God's voice. Like you keep
Right.
trying to seek him. You keep trying, even though you fall short. Like even with, sins or what we deem as sins or in a game. Like if you playing a game, you're not gonna just sit out just because you didn't. I tell my little brother this all the time. You're not gonna just sit out just because you missed one shot.
Hearing God is about wanting a relationship from God. Like you can only hear from somebody that you want to hear from.
That was so great. I'm so glad that you came on the podcast with me. We're gonna wrap it up here. Um, there's this segment at the end that we do that's the picnic. We always talk about who's allowed to come to the cookout. You got thrown out the cookout a long time ago because of like not seeing like most of the movies. I had to put D on like so many movies. Like I think the last movie I told her to watch was what was it? It was Jason Lyrics. And like she is such a real one. She sat there and she watched it and we talked about it. But she had never seen that like the classic movies. But anyway, back to the picnic. You invited to the picnic though.
Oh,
So
okay.
to the
You know
picnic,
I'm making
what would no. So the picnic we bringing fruit. We're bringing the fruits of the spirit. We're bringing like love, joy, peace, long suffering, faithfulness. Like what fruit would you bring?
Yes, I'm definitely bringing joy because you know me. We're going to strength, we're going to bring joy, and we're going to bring goodness.
Oh,
Because,
I love it.
I mean, it don't matter how someone treats you at the end of the day. If you show them the goodness of the goodness of the Lord is what changes people's hearts, it's what changes people's minds. And I mean, I already know my place is solidified. I know who I'm rocking with. So, like, come what may, whatever happens, I know the goodness of the Lord is working on me, it's working through me, and it ultimately brings joy because how can you just be around so much goodness and not feel the joy of the Lord and not experience that joy? So yeah, those two, they neck and neck.
Thank you so much for rocking with us. You guys, I want you to comment, like, subscribe down below. Tell us what ways do you hear from God. Later.